next presentation deals with practical design sprints. Our presenter is Ella Mcrae, lead product designer for InMotion software, which holds more than 40 patents and has won several industry awards. Ella, take it away.
Hi. So I'm Ella Mcrae, and I'm a lead designer, product designer for InMotion software. I have over 7 years of experience, and I specialize in product strategy and user research. So that's a little bit about me. A little bit more about my agency, InMotion. So we are a design-led agency, and we have kind of a la carte offerings. So we do everything from, the full service, POs, QA, design, dev, we'll build out the whole thing. And we also do, more a la carte offerings like, we've been asked to come in just to run workshops or to just have designers or devs. So we kind of have a lot of offerings. I'm really excited to share with you guys today our methodology on design sprints. And today I will be showing you an actual practical application of that. So we're going to be looking at a meal kit service app that we designed for a client. Also, I want to mention that if anybody has questions, I think this was already mentioned, but please post them and I will answer. So basically, this whole thing started up. We got a client call, and they basically requested us to come in and give them some space and kind of a box around what they needed to build, which was a new app idea they had. So right after that, we started, basically we leveraged some quantitative user research. So that same afternoon, we crafted a survey to get to know the goals and challenges around basically what our prospective users were thinking about the meal app space. So really, we wanted to get to know, what they were thinking around that. And, one of my favorite quotes is, if I had an hour to solve for a problem, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes solving it. Basically, you really want to get to know your problem space, because if you don't, you can't adequately solve for it. So that's why we leveraged that quantitative test. So yeah, after we got that back, we did some analysis and prep, and we definitely found some interesting insights. Like, for example, women were they preferred a smaller options list that rotated, versus men were kind of the opposite. They just wanted everything all the time. So that was really interesting. So yeah, practical design sprints. So this practical design sprint had, well, actually, let me reverse back a little bit. I'm sure at least a few of you have heard of Google Design Sprints. So I'm sure at this point you're probably wondering, how could we possibly improve a Google Design Sprint? They're the people that made self-driving cars and those balloons that, provide internet access to the most remote parts of the world. So who are we? But really, that's exactly why our methodology works, is because our clients aren't asking us to solve novel problems. We aren't often asked to invent things that have never been done before. Our clients don't suffer from a lack of ideas. Usually it's actually the opposite. Okay. So in the workshops, this is kind of our methodology. You'll probably notice, again, some similarities between us and Google. It's a 5-day sprint. We basically take the best from Google and use that as well. So one of those things is the ticking time bomb of having to user test a thing that wasn't designed on Monday. So that really sets for a very rapid pace. And one of the most successful parts of our sprint, and really it sets up the success for the entire project, so not just the sprint, is the workshop that happens on Monday. So you can see kind of some of the bullet points from this, which are personas, business objectives, value statement, prioritize epic, user journeys, and run risk registry, which I'm sure a few of you have heard of, since it's kind of an old kind of business trick. So a little bit more into the design workshop part of it. Okay, so this particular sprint that we ran had around 30 stakeholders. And I'm sure if any of you have run something like this before, or any project with many stakeholders, I'm sure that you've noticed that getting them all to agree on one thing is pretty hard to do. But really what our workshop does is it provides a constrained space where both collaboration and healthy conflict can happen. And what I mean by healthy conflict, I really think that any good design happens with some conflict. You need to challenge ideas and, logic wins, right? So really our workshop forces resolution of that healthy conflict and collaboration kind of in a really super fast-paced, charged environment. Really, the other thing that's really neat about the workshop is that it enables you to get all the right people involved. It's really important for buy-in from all parties. And it grants us access to insider knowledge and empowers the workshop to make good decisions around scope and priority quickly. So yeah, that way it's just possible to get everyone involved. And our workshop, or our sprints, optimize your stakeholder time. So unlike a Google sprint, which actually has stakeholders in all 5 days of the sprint, ours are only involved in this one day, because we found it's really hard to get C-level people to set aside an entire week of their time. And also, frankly, those people, they have better things to be doing with their time than getting out the crayons and drawing wireframes, right? What we really need from them is the information in their head, their perspective, and their decision-making skills. So again, here's kind of that list of things we run through on that day. So here's kind of the first 3 things. So the first thing we do is we do personas. So who are we making this for? So here we leverage some of that data that we pulled before the sprint even started. And then after that, we do business objectives. So why are we making this? What does the success look like? So we basically have them make a short list of tangible objectives. And basically, the business objectives paired with the personas really helps us to decide not to be everything to everyone. So it's really powerful to making any good product, right? Because that's where a lot of designs fail, is they're trying to just do too much for too many people. And then we do value statements after that. And value statements also super important, not just for the sprint, but for the entire product, because what it really does is it sets a kind of a, think of it as like a North Star to decision-making around the project. So here is kind of an example. So like we value robust features over simplicity, which is actually the reverse of what they said in the sprint. But yeah, I think that kind of articulates those first 3 steps we do. So this actually is really unique to our workshop. The next thing we do is we prioritize epics. So unlike a lot of other workshops, our sprint is focused on paring things down rather than ideation. And a large part of this is this prioritized epic exercise, which is unique to us. So basically, through ideation and the refinement process, the stakeholders come up with all the prioritized epics or features that the app really needs. So you can see here the graphic of the Swiss Army knife, and it just being a blade at first and then getting fully built out. So we kind of do the same thing through P0 to P3. So also at this point, you're probably wondering, how are we getting these 30 stakeholders to agree on these exact outcomes? So I'm just a quick note on the basic format for all of these exercises. So the first thing that you need is non-biased sprint leadership. So that's super important to resolving conflict and keeping everyone on track and on time. So the next thing that you need is you need to split up everyone into groups no larger than 6. We have found that larger than 6, the groups start to get kind of untenable. And then after that, whatever part of the exercise you're doing, you ask everyone to basically ideate individually, silently. And then after that, you have them present to their group, so within the group, and then there's a vote that happens. So again, this could be on the personas or the business value or the prioritized epics. You basically just apply the same format over and over again to each exercise. And it varies a little bit. Sometimes we'll do dot voting or finger voting. You can ask me questions about that later if you're curious. So then after that, the group presents to the entire group, so those groups of 6 present to the whole group. And the entire group does silent dot voting or finger voting. And then after that, basically a group decision and consensus is reached. And really what this does is it makes everyone feel heard, feel like they participated, and collaborated to come up with the end solution. So there's no stakeholders thinking, well, I wanted this Twitter feature, but we ended up with this other, Basically, it really helps bring the definition of the project together in a healthy way. All right. So the next part is the user journeys. So user journeys basically are our catch-all for missed features. So most stakeholders, when they're doing the previous exercise, aren't really thinking about all the edge cases. So for things like failing gracefully or forgot password, those things are really important, and most of the time they are absolutely necessary in your P0, right? So this really kind of helps catch all for this. The next thing is the Rome Risk Registry. So again, some of you may have heard of this. It's kind of an old BA or business trick. And essentially what we do throughout the day is we say, okay, if you have a concern, instead of us, getting kind of a spinning cycle and derailing the workshop, make a sticky and put it on the Rome board. And what this means is we're going to table that, and we're going to come back to it later, and we will address it. And then at the end of the day, we go through the stickies, and we have people vote on it and basically figure out what type of category risk it is. So for example, you have your resolved, owned, accepted, mitigated. So for owning, you could figure out that, hey, we need to do more research around the market for this specific thing. And then you could say, okay, Tammy, you in research, now you own this risk. And of course, there are some risks that you just have to accept because that's a part of building any product. So Tuesday, Wednesday, we start the design process. So here we start by making wireframes in visual design language. So this really helps to basically take our ideas and make them tangible, right? And this also sets us up for success on Thursday, because Thursday what we're doing is we're madly prototyping. So all this part is done by designers. So basically there's, imagine like 3 to 4 designers stuck in a room, pretty long hours, but we're having fun because we're, getting a lot done in a very short amount of time. So in this specific instance of a design sprint, we basically decided to do an A/B test around 2 different solutions. You'll notice that they look really similar. Main difference is that this has a hamburger menu and this has a bottom menu, but really the main question we were trying to answer with these is, how were our users thinking about searching for dinner? So really it's an information architecture question. So unlike Blue Apron, where you have, it's a service where they just send you meals and you have kind of very few choices, this service, you had kind of a pretty large offering of different choices and you would order it. So we were really interested in basically the mental map around how users thought about that. So Friday, we do my favorite part, which is user testing. So I've been doing this for over 7 years, and what I've found is even my work is often an educated hypothesis around what a user will do and want. And anyone that tells you differently, I have some skepticism, because even when I think that I've designed something that is a slam dunk, there's nothing that's going to come up in testing, it's the easiest, simplest flow ever, I always inevitably find at least one thing, even if it's a small thing, that can be improved. And user testing is really the backbone of any good project. Doing this up front and doing it early is essential in making sure that you have a good idea and that you have a good idea earlier. It's better to know up front that if a product or an idea isn't going to work, than developing it and seeing it flop in the market, right? That's a huge waste of money. Okay, so then after that, we presented our results to our client. We also handed over any deliverables, so all the mocks and all the research we did. And basically what happened was the client said, okay, this is fantastic. When can you start making this? So from workshop to reality. So it's not just about the workshop, and I'm sure that you've heard me throughout this mention that we're setting up success for the entire project. So basically what our client told us is that getting that scope around the project with those 30 C-level stakeholders would have normally taken them around 3 months of circular emails, and it would have had many more features than what ended up in our P0 scope. So again, the sprint really sets you up for success, and in my experience, projects seem to fail a lot because you end up having a lot of stakeholders and the project gets pulled in different ways and there's feature creep and expansion happens, and it makes it really hard to make a good product. So what we did in this sprint really sets up the rest of the work to be done. So the implementation process. So that's the sprint. What is it like actually having design in with the rest of product, building this thing out for the rest of the project? So we have a pretty rigorous weekly user testing. And so how that works is, we design, we test, we design, we test, and we do that iteratively until something's, foolproof. We're, integrating in with cross-functional Agile teams, again, on the 1-week sprints. And we kind of have rolling drops to design to engineering. So as soon as, we're finished with that iterative design process, we're dropping it to engineering. So that kind of works really well because, engineering is on a 2-week design sprint usually. And then we're also doing reviews, weekly reviews of stakeholders, just to make sure we're on track and, we are successfully, executing the vision. So again, I want to really hone in that our process is more focused on output than ideation. So here I'm going to just take you through a few slides of what the output actually looked like. So here we go. So this is the login screen evolution. So you can see our initial wireframes that was done in that first sprint. And then, what would end up getting tested to like our very sexily designed end screen. Next we have the home screen. So as you guys know, home screen is one of the most important pieces of the app. Again with the wireframe, and then kind of being able to see a second iteration of design, and it went through a third iteration of design, and finally a fourth. And one of the things that we found, so kind of an answer to that information architecture question that we had earlier, was that really it turns out people just wanted to be able to search for sushi. They didn't want to go through a bunch of categories. But we also found through user testing in this process that filtering needed to be done and favoriting so that if they have their favorite meals, they can come back and they're easily available to them. And of course, you can see our final sexy design. Product details. So this is actually kind of an interesting screen as well. And again, you can see the evolution. At first, we tested this, and the cart wasn't apparent enough, like people were missing it. So we ended up making it more apparent, and then in the end, this plus actually worked the best with users. Also, there was some content strategy around this whole page, like what exactly were users interested in? Was the description the first thing that they need to see, or did they really want calories or food allergies? And how we would display that information in what order, because what's important to them. So there was a lot of work done here on that. And then the cart. So basically getting a user successfully through a purchase is incredibly important to any app. So this part was probably even more rigorously tested than others. And you can see from this first screen here that there's the prompt is next, and that did not test well with users. What ended up is being way more specific with checkout, having the price more visible, and you can see our final very nice looking version here. So same thing with checkout, and we actually did another huge test, quantitative test around how people think about tipping. So tipping, we weren't sure if people would be thinking in terms of dollars or percent. Turns out the mental model is percent because we're just so ingrained in us as Americans to, 15% is what we tip. So yeah, this was the screen, and then it being, its final iteration, very sexy. So essentially that's it. In 8 weeks, we went from an initial prototype to validated and improved high-fidelity designs. And I really can say as a designer that I've seen myself improve through this methodology, and I've seen the processes in companies improve because of it. And it really sets the project up for success. So I guess with that, I want to open it up to questions.
Yes, we have a couple questions here. One, how does this work with Agile Development?
Well, I kind of mentioned that a little bit before, but essentially, we're working on a weekly cycle, so it fits really well with that 2-week development cycle. And also it depends on what kind of development team we're working with. So if we're working with our own, or if we're working with your development team, or if we're even working with a remote development team. So a lot of times if, we'll be embedded assets within your company, so we'll be able to sit side by side with your development team, and as we're designing and testing, we are talking with your development team about what's feasible, and kind of working with them as partners. But obviously, if you're working with a remote development team, it's a little bit more challenging, so we have to lean a little bit more on documentation. But there, we also like to focus really on lean documentation because, it's a lot of overhead, and we found that the leaner we can get on documentation, the faster, quicker, cheaper we can be about, producing successful product.
Okay, another question that you sort of referred to in the beginning of your presentation. How is this format different from a Google design print?
Yeah, so mostly it's the first workshop space, so having that only be for stakeholders the first day of the sprint, not requiring them to be in all 5 days. Also, the format of that workshop is quite different from a Google Design Sprint. So again, ours is much more focused on output and basically paring down and defining scope of what we're building. Days like 2 through, so basically Tuesday through Thursday are pretty similar to a Google Design Sprint, with the exception that we don't have a bunch of stakeholders. We leave designing wireframes and mocks to the professionals who can get it done really fast. And then, again, it's similar on the last day with the user research. So really it's just that split of stakeholder time and really thinking that, prioritization of scope is the most important part of our sprint.
Okay, that's all the questions I had, Ella. Thank you very much. I can tell you that I didn't know a lot about this topic before your presentation, but I know a lot now, so thank you. Very good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and for more information, you can certainly go to the website, inmotionsoftware.com, where they have more information for you to follow up, and probably contact information also on the screen.